Captain Joan Park stood at the command center of his merchant vessel, the Odyssey *. The ship had docked at Outpost 7 just 3 hours ago for routine resupply. His crew of 15 humans and 2 Raxus mechanics were halfway through loading cargo when the first explosion shook the station. The blast rattled the hull of the Odyssey *, causing June to stumble against his chair. Red warning lights flashed as the station's automated system announced, "Alert! Fire detected in docking bay 12. All personnel evacuate immediately." Through the large viewport, June watched as orange flames erupted from the neighboring bay. Black smoke billowed into the station's atmosphere filters. "Captain," called First Officer Tai as he rushed onto the bridge. His normally calm face looked worried. "We should seal the airlocks. Station protocol says." June raised his hand, cutting him off. "How many ships are docked in Bay 12? Tai checked the station manifest on his tablet. "Just one. A small Lumari research vessel. They arrived yesterday." June's eyes narrowed. The Lumari were a secretive species, their purple skin covered in bioluminescent patterns that shifted with their emotions. They rarely traveled beyond their own systems and almost never interacted with humans. "Prep the med bay," June ordered, already moving toward the exit, "and get hand ready with burn treatments." "Captain, you can't be thinking of." But June was already gone, racing through the corridors of his ship toward the external hatch. The station's emergency systems had kicked in, spraying fire-suppressant foam that made the floor slippery. Other crews ran in the opposite direction, following evacuation orders. "Are you crazy?" shouted a Drell dock worker as June pushed past. The whole section might decompress. June ignored him. He reached Bay 12 and paused at the entrance. The Lumari ship was unlike human vessels. Its organic-looking hull resembled polished bone, with swirling patterns etched across its surface. Now that beautiful hull had a jagged hole torn in its side, with flames licking out from the wound. The heat hit him like a wall as he approached. June pulled his sleeve over his mouth and nose, creating a makeshift filter against the smoke. The station's fire suppression systems whined overhead, working at maximum capacity, but struggling to contain the blaze. Without hesitation, June entered through the damaged hull section. Inside, the ship's layout confused him. Lumari design followed different logic than human engineering. Curved corridors twisted in unexpected directions. The heat warped the air, making it hard to see clearly. "Hello," he called out. "Anyone here?" The only response was the crackling of flames and the groan of stressed metal. June pushed deeper into the ship, keeping low where the smoke was thinner. The internal lighting flickered, casting strange shadows that danced along the walls. That's when he saw her. A Lumari female lay trapped beneath a collapsed section of ceiling. Her normally vibrant skin, famous throughout the galaxy for its bioluminescent properties, flickered weakly, the purple hue fading to a dull gray in places. Her eyes were closed, long lashes resting against high cheekbones. June rushed to her side. The metal fragment pinning her to the ground was heavy, its edges still glowing red from whatever had caused the explosion. His captain's jacket began to smoke as he positioned himself to lift the debris. "This is going to hurt," he muttered, knowing she couldn't hear him. With a grunt of effort, June heaved upward. Pain seared across his shoulders and back as the hot metal brushed against him, burning through his clothing. But he held firm, lifting just enough for the Lumari woman to be freed. Once the debris was high enough, he kicked it aside with his boot and scooped the alien into his arms. She was lighter than he expected, her body temperature noticeably cooler than a human's. Up close, he could see the delicate patterns on her skin. Pale blue lines shifting slowly across iridescent lavender, almost like electrical circuits pulsing with dim energy. The ship groaned again. Something exploded deeper in the vessel, sending a fresh wave of heat down the corridor. "Time to go," Jun said to his unconscious burden. "Ka." The journey out was worse than the way in. Smoke filled the passages now, making each breath a struggle. Twice Jun nearly took wrong turns in the confusing layout. The strain in his arms grew as he carried the Lumari through the burning ship. Finally, he staggered out through the hull breach, gasping for clean air. The relief was short-lived as he realized his own jacket had caught fire. With the Lumari still in his arms, he couldn't put it out. A station maintenance worker spotted him and rushed over with a fire extinguisher, quickly dousing the flames. "Are you out of your mind?" the man shouted. As the foam covered his back, Jun felt the sting of burns beneath his ruined clothing. He ignored the pain and continued walking, determined to get the Lumari to medical help. The docking area had filled with onlookers, humans, Drell dock workers, and representatives from 3 other species. They parted as Jun carried the alien through their midst. Their expressions ranged from shock to disapproval. "Get back," Jun ordered as they crowded too close. "She needs air." A murmur ran through the gathered beings. The Lumari were known throughout the galaxy for their isolation and distrust of other species. Many humans considered them arrogant and secretive. Some of the older spacers claimed the Lumari thought themselves superior to all other life forms. Yet here was a human captain, burned and exhausted, carrying a Lumari as carefully as he would one of his own crew. As Jun pushed through the crowd, he noticed the Lumari's skin brightening slightly. The blue patterns began to pulse more strongly against the purple background. Her eyelids fluttered. "Get a medic," Jun shouted, his voice hoarse from smoke inhalation. His arms trembled with the precious burden. His back burned with pain, but he refused to put her down on the cold deck plating. First Officer Tai appeared with 2 crew members carrying a stretcher. "Captain, you're injured," he said, concern evident in his voice. "Her first," Jun insisted as they carefully transferred the Lumari to the stretcher. As they lifted her, the alien's eyes opened fully for the first time, revealing irises of deep violet with specks of silver that seemed to catch the light like stars. Those strange eyes locked onto Jun's face with an intensity that made him catch his breath. In that moment, neither of them knew how this chance encounter would change both their lives forever. The outpost medical bay hummed with quiet activity as Jun sat beside the recovery pod containing the Lumari woman. He had refused to leave despite the medical officer's insistence that he treat his own burns. Patches of synthetic skin now covered the worst injuries on his back and shoulders, but they itched terribly. 3 days had passed since the rescue. The Lumari had remained unconscious, floating in a specialized healing gel that accommodated her unique biology. Doctors had been cautious. They rarely treated Lumari patients and had limited data on their physiology. Jun dozed in his chair, exhaustion finally overcoming his vigilance. He dreamed of purple skies and cities built from crystalline towers that sang in the wind. "You dream of my homeworld," said a melodic voice, startling him awake. The Lumari was conscious, her large violet eyes studying him from within the healing pod. The bioluminescent patterns across her skin pulsed with a steady rhythm now, much stronger than when he'd found her. "You're awake," Jun said, straightening in his chair. "How do you feel?" "Recovering." She tilted her head slightly. "My name is Nari. Captain Jun Park, of the merchant vessel Odyssey." Nari's skin patterns shifted to a brighter blue. "You risked yourself for me, Captain Park." Jun shrugged, wincing as the movement pulled at his healing burns. "Anyone would have." "No." Her bioluminescent patterns intensified, pulsing rapidly. "They would not. Your species fears mine. My species avoids yours." The medical officer entered, checking Nari's vitals on a scanner. "Remarkable recovery rate," she muttered, "almost twice as fast as human healing." When the doctor left, Nari pressed her palm against the transparent cover of the healing pod. "I must perform the binding of lives when I am released. It is our most sacred tradition." "The what?" Jun asked. "When one saves another, the life threads become entwined. The debt must be acknowledged and honored." Before Jun could ask more questions, the pod hissed open. The healing gel drained away, leaving Nari dry and seemingly refreshed. She sat up gracefully, her movements fluid despite days of immobility. June helped her stand, noticing how her skin seemed to shimmer under the medical bay's lights. She was tall for a female, nearly matching his height, with the characteristic slender build of her species. "We can begin now," Neri said, raising her hands toward June's face. June stepped back, confused. "Begin what exactly?" "The binding of lives." Her fingers remained extended toward his forehead. "It is merely gratitude," she explained when she saw his hesitation. Before June could decide how to respond, Security Chief Juan entered the medical bay. The stocky officer's expression was grave as he gestured for June to join him in the corridor. "A moment," June told Neri, then followed Juan outside. "That ship explosion wasn't random," Juan said quietly, checking to ensure they weren't overheard. "There are rumors of Lumari scientific breakthroughs. Some want those advances buried forever." June frowned. "You think someone tried to kill her?" "I think you should be careful. The Lumari don't interact with humans without reason. And now there's another Lumari vessel requesting emergency docking permission, claiming they're here to retrieve one of their own." When June returned to the medical bay, Neri was gone. A nurse explained she had been cleared to leave and had asked about the location of the Odyssey. June found her waiting outside his ship, her tall figure drawing curious stares from passers-by. She now wore a flowing garment made from a material that seemed to shift colors with her movements. "You disappeared," June said. "I needed proper attire. Your medical staff was helpful." She gestured to her clothing. "I must complete the ritual before my kinsmen arrive." June escorted her onto his ship, but kept a cautious distance. "What exactly does this ritual involve?" "It creates recognition between souls," Neri explained. "In ancient times, it ensured that life debts were properly recorded. Now it is more ceremonial, but no less important." Tai approached them as they reached the crew quarters. "Captain, there's a Lumari diplomatic vessel requesting communication with our guest." He eyed Neri with poorly concealed suspicion. "Tell them she's resting," June decided. "We'll respond in an hour." After Tai left, June showed Neri to the small conference room. "You can stay here until we figure things out. I need to check on repairs." When June returned to his personal quarters hours later, he found something unexpected outside his door. A complex arrangement of delicate crystal-like structures formed an intricate pattern on the deck plating. The formation glowed faintly with the same blue color as Neri's skin patterns. He stared at it, unsure whether to step over it or move it aside. As he contemplated the strange objects, Neri appeared around the corner. "You created this?" he asked. "It's our way," she said simply, approaching the arrangement. "When life is given, life responds." Her fingers adjusted one of the crystal formations slightly. "Each placement represents an aspect of the bond formed when you pulled me from the fire. Position, color, density, all have meaning." June studied the pattern more carefully. "And what does this one mean?" He pointed to a dark purple crystal at the center. "That represents the moment our fates became connected." Neri's skin pulsed with a new pattern, one June hadn't seen before. "My people believe nothing happens without purpose. Our meeting was written in the stars long before either of us drew breath." "You believe in destiny. I believe in consequences." Her eyes met his. "Your act of courage will have consequences neither of us can fully predict." A communication alert buzzed from the ship's system. "Captain," came Ta's voice, "the Lumari vessel is demanding immediate access. They're threatening to involve station security." Neri's skin patterns darkened. "They have arrived sooner than expected." "Who are they?" June asked. "Friends of yours." "Not friends," Neri replied, her melodic voice turning solemn. "They are my handlers, and they will not be pleased that I have begun the binding with an outsider." "Is that going to be a problem?" Neri touched one of the crystals, causing the entire formation to shift its glow. "It may be the biggest problem either of us has ever faced." June paced nervously as the Lumari delegation waited in the outpost's diplomatic chamber. They had agreed to a meeting rather than coming directly to his ship, which gave him time to speak privately with Nari. "You need to tell me what's really going on," he said as they sat in the Odyssey's galley. The small dining area was empty at this hour, the rest of the crew busy with repairs or sleeping. Nari's fingers traced patterns on the metal table. "I have not been entirely forthcoming." "That's putting it mildly," Jun replied. "Those Lumari officials don't seem like they're here for a friendly reunion." Nari's skin dimmed slightly, the blue pattern slowing their dance across her purple surface. "I'm a biomolecular harmonizer," she admitted after a long pause. "My research could allow different species to share medical treatments without rejection." June leaned forward. "I don't understand. Currently, medicines created for one species are often toxic to others. Treatments must be completely redesigned for each biology." Nari's hands moved as she spoke, gesturing in the air as if manipulating invisible objects. "I've discovered a method to create adaptable treatments that reshape themselves to match any recipient's cellular structure." June listened, fascinated by how her skin's patterns changed with her emotions, brightening with passion as she described her work, dimming with concern as she mentioned obstacles. "This would revolutionize medicine throughout the galaxy," he said. "Yes, but it would also eliminate a very profitable industry." Nari's eyes held his. "The explosion was meant to destroy my work, and me with it. There are those who profit from our divisions. The pharmaceutical guilds," Jun realized. "They make trillions developing species-specific medicines." Nari nodded. "The delegation arriving is not from my research institute as they claim. They represent the Lumari Medical Consortium, the largest producer of Lumari-specific treatments in our sector. And they want to stop your research from becoming public." "They want to control it," Nari corrected, "or destroy it if they cannot." Jun ran a hand through his hair. "We need to alert station security." "It would not help. The consortium has representatives throughout our government. That's why I was traveling alone, with my research disguised." She touched a simple bracelet on her wrist. "All my work is stored here, in crystalline memory." After their conversation, Jun arranged extra security for the ship and advised Nari to rest. He retired to his own quarters, mind racing with all he had learned. The simple rescue had become far more complicated than he could have imagined. Sleep came eventually, but it brought strange dreams. Jun found himself floating through unfamiliar star systems, the colors wrong. Stars in shades of purple and blue that didn't exist in his understanding of astronomy. He felt emotions washing over him that had no names in human language. Complex feelings that seemed to have textures and flavors rather than simple descriptions. He saw crystalline cities under twin moons, felt the peculiar sensation of bioluminescent skin responding to sunlight. In one vivid moment, he experienced the memory of a young Lumari child discovering her first skin pattern change, the joy and apprehension blending together in ways his human brain struggled to categorize. Jun woke gasping, his body covered in sweat. The room seemed to spin around him as unfamiliar sensations continued to flood his mind. He stumbled to the bathroom and splashed cold water on his face, trying to ground himself in familiar sensations. A soft knock at his door drew his attention. Nari stood outside, her skin patterns pulsing rapidly. "You felt it," she said. Not a question. Jun nodded, unable to find words for what he had experienced. "The binding has begun," Nari explained as she entered his quarters. "It was not my intention, but when you carried me, my body's defense mechanisms initiated a connection." "What kind of connection?" Jun asked, his voice hoarse. "A mental link. My species uses it to communicate with family members across distances. In times of extreme stress or danger, it can activate automatically with anyone in close contact." She looked troubled. This should not have been possible with a human. But it happened. Yes, and now it grows stronger. Nari's eyes studied his face. "You've been experiencing my memories. I have been experiencing your emotions." Jun sat heavily on the edge of his bed. "Is it permanent?" "I don't know. Cross-species binding has no precedent. Their conversation was interrupted by an emergency alert. Tay's voice came through the ship's communication system. "Captain, armed individuals have breached outpost security. They're heading for our docking bay." June was immediately on his feet. "Seal all entrances. Prepare for emergency departure." He and Neri rushed to the bridge. Through the viewport, they could see figures in dark armor moving across the docking area, weapons drawn. "Those aren't Lumari officials," June observed. "Mercenaries," Neri confirmed. "Hired by the consortium. They won't risk using their own people for a direct assault." The ship's sensors showed the outpost's security forces engaging the intruders, but they were outnumbered. Several mercenaries had already reached the Odyssey's docking clamps. "Can we break free?" June asked his pilot. "Not without damaging the ship," the young woman replied. "We need proper release protocols." June made a quick decision. "Override the safety systems. We're leaving now." As the crew rushed to prepare for emergency departure, June felt a strange tingle at the base of his skull. Without thinking, he ducked, just as a laser blast hit the viewport where his head had been moments before. One of the mercenaries had reached a position with a clear shot at the bridge. "How did you know?" Tai asked, staring at the smoking impact point. June glanced at Neri, whose skin was pulsing rapidly. "I just sensed it." The Odyssey's engines roared to life. Metal screamed as the ship tore away from its docking clamps, causing alarms to blare throughout the vessel. The sudden acceleration threw everyone against their restraints. "We've cleared the station," the pilot announced. "Calculating hyperspace jump." "Make it fast," Jun ordered, watching as a small pursuit vessel detached from the outpost and began following them. The stars stretched into lines as the Odyssey leaped into hyperspace. The familiar disorientation of faster-than-light travel washed over the crew. In the sudden quiet after their escape, Neri moved to stand beside Jun's command chair. Her fingers lightly touched his shoulder. "Your mind," she whispered as the hyperspace corridor engulfed them, "is strangely compatible with mine." Jun turned to look at her, noticing for the first time that the blue patterns on her skin seemed to pulse in rhythm with his own heartbeat. "What does that mean for us?" he asked quietly. Neri's expression held both wonder and concern. "It means we have much to discover together, if we survive what comes next." The Odyssey dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Ceti Nebula. Vast clouds of purple and green gas stretched before them, dotted with newborn stars that glowed like beacons in the cosmic mist. It was beautiful, but Jun had no time to appreciate the view. "Status report," he ordered, scanning the readouts on his command chair. "Hyperspace engines need cooling," the engineer reported from below deck. "We pushed them hard during our escape. 20 minutes minimum before another jump." Ta monitored the long-range sensors. "No sign of pursuit yet, Captain." Jun nodded, though he felt uneasy. The mental connection with Neri had grown stronger during their hyperspace journey. Occasionally he caught glimpses of her thoughts, abstract and alien, but increasingly comprehensible. "They're following," Neri said quietly from beside him. She had remained on the bridge since their escape, her tall figure becoming a familiar presence among the human crew. "I can sense their determination." As if confirming her words, the sensors beeped in alarm. "Two vessels just dropped out of hyperspace," Tai announced, his voice tight. "Consortium markings. They're on an intercept course." Jun studied the tactical display. The nebula offered some cover, but its gases would interfere with sensors and weapons on both sides. A straight chase would end badly. The pursuing ships were smaller and faster than the bulky merchant vessel. "Take us into the nebula," Jun ordered. "Full impulse power." The Odyssey plunged into the colorful clouds, visibility quickly dropping as gas and dust surrounded them. On the sensors, the two pursuit vessels adjusted course, following directly behind. "They're gaining," Tai reported after several tense minutes. "Estimated weapons range in 3 minutes." The crew looked to Jun for direction. As captain of a merchant vessel, he had limited combat experience. and everyone knew it. The Odyssey carried basic defensive shields but minimal weapons. It was built for cargo, not combat. June closed his eyes, feeling the strange new presence in his mind that was Neri. He didn't fight it this time, but instead opened himself to the connection. Through it came impressions of Lumari philosophy, their concepts of time and space, their understanding of motion itself. In his mind, he saw gravitational fields not as the simple wells he had learned about, but as complex, interconnected webs that could be manipulated through precise movement. He sensed the nearby stars exerting their influence, creating patterns of force that human science only partially understood. His eyes snapped open. "Change course to heading 227.3, June ordered suddenly. Then cut engines precisely 12 seconds later. Ta looked up from his console, alarmed. "That's inside the gravity well of that protostar," he protested, pointing to a bright point in the nebula. "We could be pulled in." "Trust me," June said with a confidence he didn't fully understand. The pilot hesitated for only a moment before adjusting their course. The Odyssey banked sharply, heading toward the young star forming in the nebula's heart. The hull creaked as gravitational forces began to pull at the ship. 10 seconds, the pilot counted. 11, 12. The engines cut out, leaving the ship in eerie silence as it continued on its trajectory. Through the viewport, they watched as the first pursuit vessel followed them precisely, clearly expecting another engine burst to change direction. Instead, the Odyssey curved around the protostar in a trajectory that shouldn't have been possible according to standard navigation calculations. The pursuing ship tried to correct, but was caught in the stronger gravitational pull. Its engines flared as it attempted to break free, but the effort came too late. The ship spiraled closer to the protostar, not close enough to be destroyed, but trapped in a challenging escape trajectory. The second pursuer, witnessing this, slowed its approach and began circling cautiously. "Engines back online," June ordered as they completed their slingshot around the star. The Odyssey leaped forward, putting distance between themselves and the remaining threat. The bridge crew stared at their captain. No one spoke for several moments. "That was impossible," Ta finally said. "The gravitational math doesn't work that way." Jun didn't respond. He felt drained, as if the maneuver had cost him physically. Neri touched his shoulder lightly, her skin patterns showing concern. "You need rest," she said softly. Hours later, after they had lost the second pursuer in the denser regions of the nebula, Neri found June on the observation deck. The small viewing area at the top of the ship offered panoramic views of space. June sat alone, watching the nebula's swirling colors. "You used Lumari orbital mathematics," she said, impressed as she joined him. "No human has ever understood our approach to gravitation." "I didn't understand it," June admitted. "I just felt it." Neri sat beside him, her luminescent skin casting a soft glow in the dimly lit room. "Our scientists spend decades studying the interconnections between gravitational bodies. We see patterns where your species sees only individual forces. I saw it through you," June said, like remembering something I never learned. "The binding grows stronger," Neri acknowledged. "This is unprecedented between our species." June turned to face her. "Is it dangerous?" "All new things contain danger and possibility in equal measure." Her patterns shifted to a deeper blue. "But I believe this connection saved our lives today." They sat in comfortable silence, watching as the nebula's gases created ever-changing patterns outside the viewport. June discovered he could now sense Neri's emotions without looking at her skin patterns, a sense of wonder mixed with scientific curiosity, layered over lingering concern about their pursuers. "Can you feel what I'm feeling?" he asked. "Yes," she replied simply. "Your emotions are vivid, more direct than a Lumari's would be." The ship hummed around them as the crew went about their duties. The bond between them grew stronger as their time together continued, until June could sense emotions and thoughts never meant for human minds. He caught glimpses of Neri's childhood on a world with 3 moons, felt her excitement when she made her first scientific discovery, experienced her loneliness as the only Lumari on her research team. "Tomorrow we reach the border of Alliance space," Jun said eventually. "We should be safer there." Nari's patterns darkened. The consortium has influence even in Alliance territories, and now that they know about our connection, they will be more determined than ever to stop us. Why would our connection concern them? Because it proves what my research suggests, that the barriers between species are not as fixed as many believe. Nari's eyes met his. If a human and Lumari can share thoughts, what other connections might be possible? The ship's communication system interrupted them. "Captain to the bridge," came Ta's urgent voice. "Long-range sensors detect 3 vessels on intercept course." June stood quickly. "I thought we lost them." "These are different ships," Nari said, her skin patterns shifting rapidly as she processed the information coming through their bond. "Larger. Military class. The consortium has military vessels." "No," Nari replied, her voice grave. "But they have allies who do." As they hurried toward the bridge, Jun felt Nari's growing concern through their connection. But beneath the worry was something else, a determined resolve that matched his own. Whatever came next, they would face it together, their minds increasingly functioning as one despite the vast differences in their biology and background. And in that unity, Jun sensed something the consortium clearly feared: power. The mammoth structure of the Galactic Council Station hung in space before them, its ring-shaped design glittering with thousands of lights. Under normal circumstances, the sight would have filled Jun with relief. The Council Station represented neutral territory, a place where the laws of all major species were respected and enforced. Today, it offered no such comfort. "They're blocking our approach to the docking bays," Tay reported, his fingers dancing across the control panel. "One vessel directly ahead, 2 more moving to flank us." The Odyssey had been running for nearly 2 weeks. Their journey had taken them through 3 star systems and countless dangerous maneuvers. The ship showed signs of the chase: scorch marks along the hull from near misses, depleted fuel reserves, and an exhausted crew. June studied the tactical display. The pursuing ships had finally cornered them, using the Council Station itself to limit their escape routes. The largest vessel bore diplomatic markings, but carried weapons far beyond standard allowances. "Open communication channels to the Council's security force," Jun ordered. "They're jamming us," the communications officer replied. "We can't get through." Nari stood beside Jun's command chair, her luminescent skin patterns pulsing rapidly with concern. Over the past 2 weeks, their mental connection had deepened to the point where words were often unnecessary. June could feel her thoughts brushing against his consciousness, complex and alien, yet increasingly familiar. "We have one chance," Nari said quietly. "Together." June understood immediately. During their journey, they had discovered that their unique connection allowed them to blend their abilities in unexpected ways. June's human tactical thinking, combined with Nari's Lumari perception, created something entirely new. "Everyone, secure for possible impacts," Jun announced to the crew. "Ta, be ready to execute maneuvers on my mark, exactly as I call them." The final confrontation came as the lead pursuit ship moved to block their path to the Council's main docking area. Cornered by the remaining pursuit ships, Jun and Nari stood side by side on the bridge. Without speaking, they joined their minds fully. The sensation was disorienting at first, like diving into an ocean of unfamiliar concepts and sensations. But Jun had grown accustomed to navigating Nari's consciousness, just as she had learned to interpret his. Together, they perceived the space around the Odyssey differently. Jun contributed his understanding of ship capabilities and tactical positioning. Nari added her species' unique grasp of gravitational fields and energy patterns. In their shared mental space, they crafted a strategy that neither could have conceived alone. "Reverse thrusters, full power," Jun ordered suddenly. "Then rotate 180 degrees on the vertical axis." The crew responded instantly. The Odyssey jerked backward, catching their pursuers by surprise. As the ship spun, Jum continued issuing commands. Release cargo pods 3 and 5. Activate their emergency beacons. 2 large containers ejected from the ship's hold, their warning lights flashing brightly. Now full power to forward shields. Direct course toward the lead vessel. Captain, Ta questioned, alarmed. That's a collision course. Trust me, Jum said, feeling Neri's confidence flowing through their bond. The Odyssey surged forward, straight toward the largest enemy ship. Their opponents, confused by the cargo pod diversion and the seemingly suicidal approach, hesitated crucial seconds before responding. Now, June and Neri exclaimed simultaneously. The Odyssey veered sharply upward at the last possible moment. The sudden maneuver, combined with the precise timing of the cargo pod releases, created a cascade effect. The enemy vessels, attempting to avoid both the Odyssey and the drifting cargo, found themselves in danger of colliding with each other. The lead ship fired its weapons in panic, but the shots went wide. One blast struck the Council Station's outer defensive shield, triggering automatic alarms throughout the sector. Council Defense Force vessels incoming, reported the sensor officer, relief evident in her voice. Within minutes, Council security ships surrounded the area. The pursuing vessels were disabled by precise ion charges, damaged but intact with their crews unharmed. The elegant strategy had succeeded. Without firing a single weapon, the Odyssey had exposed its pursuers and forced them into actions that violated Council space. 2 days later, June and Neri stood in the Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council. Representatives from 12 major species sat in a semicircle before them. The evidence against the Lumari Medical Consortium had been overwhelming once investigators examined the disabled ships. The Lumari ambassador, an elder whose skin patterns showed complexity gained through centuries of life, addressed the council. The actions of the consortium were unauthorized and do not represent our people's wishes, he stated formally. We officially recognize Neri's research as legitimate and worthy of protection under council law. Murmurs passed through the assembled representatives. The implications of Neri's work would change medicine throughout the galaxy, breaking monopolies that had existed for generations. There is one more matter, the ambassador continued, turning toward June and Neri. The bond that has formed between these two individuals is unprecedented. Our oldest records contain no instance of a successful mental binding between Lumari and any other species. Neri stepped forward. With the Council's permission, I wish to complete the ritual of binding that began when Captain Park saved my life. Permission granted, Neri turned to face June. The chamber fell silent as she raised her hands to frame his face. Her skin glowed with intense patterns that shifted from blue to purple and back again. The gift of resonance is given, she announced in a clear voice, touching her forehead to June's. The contact sent a wave of sensation through June's mind. Not pain, but a profound shift, as if neural pathways were being permanently rewritten. When Neri stepped back, the world looked different to him. The alien representatives no longer appeared as inscrutable other beings. Instead, he perceived subtle cues in their postures, colorings, and movements that conveyed emotions and intentions as clearly as human expressions. This has never been bestowed outside our kind, the Lumari ambassador stated, astonished. The human representative leaned forward. What exactly has happened here? Captain Park has received the gift of resonance, Neri explained. It is a permanent enhancement of perception, not full telepathy, but something more profound. The ability to understand across species boundaries. June felt the change immediately. Where other humans saw only inscrutable aliens, he perceived beings with hopes, fears, and dreams. Different, but recognizable. The Drell representative's skin temperature revealed anxiety. The Voshian delegate's antenna position showed intense curiosity. Meanings that had always been hidden to human perception were now clear to him. As the council session ended, June and Neri found a quiet moment alone in one of the station's observation lounges. The stars beyond the viewport seemed somehow more connected now, part of a comprehensible whole rather than distant, separate points. The reward for courage, Neri told him privately, is understanding. June smiled. I never expected any reward for pulling you from that fire. Perhaps that is why you deserved one, she replied, her skin patterns forming the Lumeri expression for profound affection. 3 months later, as the first human Lumeri liaison officer in history, Captain Jun Park stepped into a role no one had imagined possible. His unique abilities made him invaluable in diplomatic situations where misunderstandings had previously created barriers between species. The Odyssey was recommissioned as a diplomatic vessel, with June commanding and Neri serving as both science officer and co-liaison. Together, they traveled to worlds where humans had never been welcomed, opening doors long sealed by mistrust and difference. On particularly clear nights, when starlight streamed through the ship's viewports, Jones sometimes reflected on how a single moment of courage, running toward danger rather than away from it, had changed not just his life, but potentially the course of interspecies relations throughout the galaxy. And in those moments, he could feel Neri's thoughts touching his own, her gratitude and affection flowing through the bond between them. The most precious reward he could have imagined.